Hey Deep Chatters, I'm Leah Morris here with my co-host Jennifer Butler, and this is Deep Chats Podcast, where we have raw discussions about real life. Each week you can expect unfiltered, no BS conversations from the heart about topics that actually might matter to you. We're just a couple of relationship coaches who want to cut through the small talk and dive deeper. So thanks for joining us on this journey, and be sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. All right, we're back, Deep Chatters. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We have an amazing guest. I'm really excited to welcome Emma Wynne. Emma is a men's vulnerability coach and NLP Master Practitioner. And I am super excited because I think vulnerability is something that we've dived into a lot on Deep Chats, but specifically men's vulnerability is something that I just think is so important right now, and to have somebody who specializes in that and for us to just dive into discussion is going to be really great. But Emma, I think I'm just going to let you have the floor, and why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Thank you. It's great to be here. I love having these chats. I wish I could do this sort of thing just all day, every day, and that be, part of like it. So I've had a very big journey myself with vulnerability. So I guess, people sort of say to me, "Oh, why did you choose to work with men? Like, what's the deal there?" And I feel like part of my story almost mirrors some of the issues that our men in life face, being that they're taught to wear masks. It's all these masks of what masculinity actually looks like, and that can cause lots of issues like depression, anxiety. I think we can all relate to trying to be someone who we aren't truly authentically. And that was a big part of my story. I grew up in the Christian church. I was married very young at 20. And when I divorced at 25, I sort of realized from 20 to 25 that I was wearing these masks. I was this person that I was taught to be, but not who I truly authentically am. And so I've spent the last 5 years since my divorce peeling off those masks of who I was taught to be and moving away from the structures that I was brought up in. And I've really started questioning, who actually am I away from the values and beliefs that I've been taught, that I've sort of had put on me from other people, essentially. And a big part of that journey has been getting in touch with my true self, which requires vulnerability to then show that true self to others, when it comes to relationships, friendships, your career, like all of it. And I have found just through talking with men that they seem to be able to relate to that they've been wearing these masks of masculinity, like things like strong means silent, and I've got to hold it all together for everybody. And sadly, we're losing our men because of it. Like I personally have been to just way too many male suicide funerals, friends of mine, friends of my brother. It's just like, it absolutely breaks my heart. And I always say to people when they say, "I don't know what my passion is, I don't know where I want to go, like I don't know what I was born to do," and I say to them, what breaks your heart? And whatever that is, your purpose is healing that in the world. And for me, men's mental health and men feeling alone and sadly taking their own lives, that really breaks my heart. So that's sort of how, a shortish version of how I've gotten to where I am today.
Oh, I love that question. What breaks your heart?
Yeah.
So
it just, it makes you sort of like, rather than think about it, feel it, and that's where all the goodness is, like feeling what's in your heart space. So it really helped me when I sort of started asking myself that question. Yeah.
Well, I can relate to you on a few different levels, just in that short intro that you had, with being raised in a very almost militant Christian upbringing, and not having a lot of I guess agency in terms of what I wanted, what was true for me, what my feelings were. It was very much like I wanted to feel connection within my community, within my family, and everything around me, then I needed to conform and abide by this set of rules that was already set out for me. And so you kind of just completely lose touch with not only like how to be vulnerable, but like what even like is true so that I can be vulnerable in that. Like the truth is lost even. So
Absolutely.
I find it really interesting that you even like correlated that to the experience of men in our world. And it is, now that you're saying it, it is so connected. It's very similar.
Yeah, I find they parallel, you know, and that's often when men do speak to me. And this is the thing, like I've always connected well with men, you know. I did social work for 7 years, and I had male clients. It just so happened my manager would always sort of give me the boys. I worked with teenagers, and so I have had the privilege of men opening up to me for quite a number of years before I sort of streamlined my work into specifically, you know, coaching men around this issue of vulnerability. And a lot of the time it's that drop down from their head to the heart, you know. And so it's like you're saying, Leah, like we're taught these ways to connect that, and you know, because we're neurobiologically wired for belonging and acceptance. So to move away from what we've been taught that looks like is a very scary thing, you know. And for me, it was similar, sounds like to you, Leah, is, you know, conformity to a religion, you know, and to be doing the right thing and what's pure and what's of, you know, goodness and what is pleasing to God and of service to others, and you just sort of lose yourself in amongst that. But when you correlate that to belonging and being loved, it's like we just naturally keep doing it until we sort of wake up a little and start to question it, which I find is that's the story of a lot of men, just in the sense of masculinity, you know, and like being a man. Because I'm not there to teach a man how to be a man. Like I'm quite a feminine woman, you know. Like you girls are getting me first thing in the morning here in Australia, but normally, you know, it's you know, I'm a bit of a girl. So when it comes to the bloke stuff, you know, people are like, how do you like help men be men? And it's like, no, it's about helping men find their truth, you know, and step into their natural masculinity, which as I have said, I feel parallels, you know.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting just kind of listening to you guys go back and forth. I was just kind of thinking, for me, what was it? I grew up in a very Catholic upbringing, right? And, you know, for me, it was always more about I was kind of taught to view myself through everybody else's lenses, right?
Yes.
So what, you know, how does that look like? What are people going to think of you? What are people going to say about you? And always kind of judge what I'm doing and who I'm being based on how others will view that.
Yes.
And so I'm just I haven't really put this together until now. And so as I'm listening to you guys, I'm like, gosh, and my whole, you know, young adulthood was about finding ways to be accepted. I was telling Leah this in one of our episodes, I started to even hear it in my voice. Like even when I talk,
wow,
the tilt in my voice, like, do you accept what I'm saying? Is it okay? Like, and I'd wait to see, all right, is that okay? If it's okay, I'll keep talking. If it's not, then I'll pull it back. Right. And so it's just so interesting because I never even really thought about vulnerability and any of that because I didn't even have a self. It was so based on, you know, using everybody else as like the sort of barometer for who I was supposed to be. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find that's really common too. I can certainly relate to that. And I do find that that's really common with anyone I work with or just have these kinds of discussions with. It's like, well, it's not like I've seen my true self and then seen the other and I've chosen the other. It's like, I didn't even know there was such a thing that I could just actually be me, you know, and regardless of what other people think or feel, or that my value isn't based on that. It's not even something that a lot of people question because it's so quickly ingrained within us through things like religion, culture, the media, you know, rule of manners, you know, and being polite and, you know, pleasing everyone else. And I guess it changes culture to culture as well. But, you know, over here, that's definitely a thing, you know, like we call it sort of like tall poppy syndrome, like you know, and it's based on what, you know, you don't want to be too big, like you don't want to be, you don't want to be too loud, you don't want to be too much, you know, we've got to keep everyone else sort of happy. And it's when you realize it, it's the biggest aha moment, you know, where you go, oh, that's something that I've learned. It's been modeled, you know, and until it's questioned, we'll keep doing it.
I think too, it's like this like urge to keep people happy, you know, and that urge to have that belonging and that connectiveness, actually is what prevents us from having true emotional intimacy. Like that, it's weird how the thing we want the most is being held at arm's length, because what we're focusing on and the way that we think that we need to get it is backwards. And that's, I think, where the vulnerability piece comes in, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like a catch-22 where, you know, I talked about this last week on my podcast about self-sabotage. And one way to work out if you are self-sabotaging is to look at the area. It's often whatever the result is, you know, that you're wanting the opposite, you know, but to lean into what it is we truly desire, that's vulnerable. You know, like Brene Brown says, joy is like the most vulnerable emotion to experience because there's a threat of loss, you know. So to be able to lean in and express what it is you actually desire in life, or what you need in life from a relationship or, you know, a career path, like that's vulnerable, even to just get in touch with yourself and express that, and then not sabotage it as well, you know, and sort of do the opposite of what it, like you're saying, like to not do the opposite of where it is you're actually wanting to go. Because I often find when that happens, it's a protection mechanism, you know. It's like we're almost too afraid of our own power, you know, where so we do the things that sabotage because there's fear there, you know, because it's vulnerable. It's vulnerable to go after what you want, or to be who you want to be, or who you feel you truly are.
That's one of my favorite Marianne Williamson quotes, right? Like she says, like, it's not that we're afraid of failing, or it's not that we're afraid of our darkness. We're afraid of our light, right? We're afraid of how powerful we really are.
Yes.
I love that. And it's interesting because I do notice that with clients, like it's very easy for people to tell you what they don't want, but the second you say, well, what do you want? That's like one of the hardest questions for people to answer. It was one of the hardest questions for me to answer. There was a long time that I had no idea what I wanted.
Absolutely. Yeah. And because we're subtly taught, you know, like your mind downloads, we model the environment we've grown up in, right? So, and it's subliminal messaging. So even songs like You Can't Always Get What You Want, you know, like listening to that, you know, your subconscious mind is just going to believe what it's told, which is, this is why like inner talk is so imperative, because whatever you are saying to yourself, your subconscious mind takes as a directive. It's like, oh, okay, that's where we're going. That's who we are. That's how we behave. That's our worth, you know. So listening to things like, you know, you can't always have what you want, or money doesn't grow on trees, or, you know, you've got to work hard, or, you know, just all of those sort of statements that we've all heard a million times throughout our lives, and growing up and in our family homes, and, you know, on TV and through music, you know, that stuff, like it sticks with us. And then if it stays in there as the narrative, that's the place that we start to live from.
Yeah. I'm curious too, with men being your focus, you know, what do you find any patterns in terms of like the narrative that they're telling themselves as far as, you know, what they deserve or what they don't deserve or anything like that?
Yeah, great question, because I do actually. I find a lot of the men that I work with they don't there's not a lot of acknowledgement for how far they've come. There seems to be a real detachment from you know, what they've been through, and this ability to like sit with that and acknowledge it within themselves and reflect on that. Instead, it's just been very much, oh, you just get up, you keep going, and I'll be right. You know, they'll sometimes, you know, really unload with me, and then go, but you know, everything happens as it's, you know, for a reason, and they sort of try and justify it almost, or, you know, to be able to like sit in that space of like, that's like, you've really been through some shit, like, you know, like that's a lot for you to just sort of sit in that space of acknowledging their pain. I find it's something they, you know, they'll put words on, and then they'll escape it. They'll be like, you know, next question. So that's certainly is a pattern, and also this belief that, you know, just to have it all together, and to be this like strong pillar within all of their communities, family, work, you know, that real attitude of, you know, yeah, she'll be right. Like it's, and that strong means silent, you know, it takes a lot sometimes to warm them up a little bit, you know. Sometimes sessions will go longer than sometimes planned, because it just takes them a little while to warm up, because you know, women, we will just express, it just comes quite naturally for the feminine, but for our masculine, that it takes a little bit longer. But once they drop into that, their heart space, you see the whole physical presence just changes, you know. They really relax and start to realize that there's a real exploration that they're allowed to take within themselves. But it's almost like they just haven't been given the permission to do that. They've had no one hold the space for them to do that. So it's very foreign.
Yeah, I mean, I just think about little boys, right? And it's, you know,
yes,
you're fine, get up, you know, shake it off, you know, little boys don't cry, like all that
absolutely
messaging, right? And like, you're okay, you're fine. And it's heartbreaking, because I have a 13-year-old son, and he is, and always has, he is so much feeling. He's so sweet,
yes,
and so tender. And every mother of a boy will describe their boy as like just pure love, right? They're just so sweet. And even now at 13, he'll come over and hug me, or he'll, you know, tell me, you look so pretty, mom, you know, and things like that. And I'm
beautiful.
like, oh, like, why can't we let all our boys just carry that through life and
absolutely
be masculine and still be tender?
Yes, I love that expression of tender, like to not harden so much. It's beautiful. And I guess that's why, when I've only just thought about this now, but when they do have space, our men held for them, once they hit that sort of sensitive tenderness within themselves, they do it is familiar once they get there, because I guess like as children it has been there, and just throughout their growing up it's been halted with, it was being told to, you know, stop, or other layers have built upon it. That's beautiful. It's what a this is the thing, I don't have children, but I really hope I do have boys, because I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the girls, but you know, little boys, I nannied for a little while between social work and coaching, and I did actually notice a difference between the girls that I nannied and the boys. And the boys were, particularly as babies, I found they were much more sort of like dependent on the mum, or the female. So even for me in the nanny role, than the girls. The girls were a little bit more like independent and fierce, you know, but the boys, and then I sort of started asking friends of mine who have both boys and girls as children, and they've expressed that it is a very different experience, and that the boys sometimes are attached for a little bit longer than their daughters have been, which I find really interesting too.
It's very interesting, because it almost flips. It's almost like we socialize our natural states out of us.
So
and
true.
Then work the rest of our lives trying to get back to our natural state. It's like,
I know. It's like, what?
like, what? Like,
yeah, it's so interesting. It really is. Yeah.
Have have you ever coached any women or females or anything like that? Like,
yeah, I had. So after I did the Single Wives, which was a reality TV show that's now on Netflix for anyone who wants to have a little peek. I actually stepped into coaching women in that dating space. So I'd gotten so much from Matthew Hussey on the show, and I thought, you know, like, I'm divorced, I've hit the dating scene at, you know, 26 or something for the first time in my life. Did everything backwards, you know, who wants to conform to the natural ways of living. So married, divorced, then dating. So I coached women for maybe 12 months. And then I sort of had a bit of I thought, this doesn't feel really aligned. Like, I know the coaching that's my thing, but it just didn't quite feel aligned. And then I, you know, did my NLP training and really started tapping into myself and listening to my truth again. And even that, stepping out as a woman, you know, publicly, to say I'm a men's vulnerability coach, like, I cop it. I cop it from people. Who do you think you are, teaching men how to be men? You know, like, it's just like that it's a thing, you know. So that, even for me, was quite vulnerable to publicly just claim that title of this is what I'm doing, this is who I am, this is who I work with, this is what I specialize in, because it's different, you know, and people don't really like different. It freaks them out. It's unknown.
Mm-hmm.
Brain doesn't like unknown.
I don't know. I fucking love it. I love that you own that. Like, I think it's amazing. Because I still coach women too, but the majority of my clients are male. And when I first started coaching, it was mainly women. And it's just slowly, the more and more I've like honed my skill, the more I think it just has naturally drawn in that male energy, that masculine energy that needs healing. And I think it's because I too have learned how to be more vulnerable, tender, and soft. And when you have that receptivity and that softness to you, I think the draw for that masculine energy, I think is higher. At least that's kind of what I attribute it to. And so I love that you're like, hey, this is my genius zone. Like, this is what I'm going to be in full ownership of, because like good on you for that. Like, that is needed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that, you know, you got to practice what you preach, you know. So I sort of thought, here I am, you know, because even when I was working with women, it was very much around finding your truth and not listening to the labels of divorce and shame and judgment and things like that, and working with a lot of women coming out of marriages, and a lot of that is like, you know, find your truth and express it, and find that bravery and that courage to step into your vulnerability and express your truth. And so sort of like, you gotta, when you're in this space, you gotta really check in with yourself a lot. You know, you always want to be transparent what you're doing with your own personal life and yourself and your journey, and what you're walking along others doing, which with the two of you, I can imagine, would relate to that as well.
Well, absolutely. But it's kind of funny, because this has definitely been an area that I've been really consciously deepening into lately, and really pulling back the veils that I think, even when you're consciously aware of vulnerability and practicing, you know, kind of leaning into it, I'll continue to just find areas like, whoa, like, I've been hiding, you know, like, I just realized this last week, I think.
Yes.
Like, I've been hiding behind quote cards, right? My whole social media is quote cards.
Wow.
Right. And I didn't realize it until somebody said, why don't you post pictures of yourself? And I was like, oh, well, if I'm going to be really honest, I've been hiding behind it. Like, not, you know. And so it's just, I think it's just this like constant willingness to open and reveal, right? Even as parts of ourselves get revealed to us, being willing to reveal that to others.
Absolutely. And I find that whenever I step into, and I was actually talking through this concept with a client this week, is that whenever I step more into my truth, and like you're saying, Jen, like removing more veils, you know, and going, oh, that's an area for me, the more it's like, it's rewarded. You know, I find that then I have more flow in my business, or all of a sudden I'm like, oh, there's more money in the bank account, you know, or, you know, the universe just goes, yes, sister, like you're on the path, this is it. And I'm going to give you things to show you that, like, affirm that for you. So when you start to correlate, or, you know, the reward as well that comes with doing that inner work, and that just that inner feeling to reward of like, wow, I'm really on my path, you're more inclined to sort of lean into that unknown area of the confrontation of things, like asking yourself, yeah, why aren't I showing my face more on my social media? What's that all about? You know? So it's one of my favorite concepts is leaning in. So wherever we feel a little bit uncomfortable, just lean in.
Yeah.
There'll be something there for you. Just keep leaning.
Yeah, I feel like that's all we've been having to do, or not having to do, but that's all lately with the way the world is. It's just like there's so much uncertainty and so much discomfort and so many edges that we're discovering just as like a collective. And I think it's forcing us to, again, either lean in or lean out. And I think that unfortunately a lot of people are not ready to lean in, and because vulnerability in their mind is not yet correlated with reward, it's correlated with, you know, hurt and pain and suffering. Definitely. And so that leaning out is creating, I just got sent an article the other day that I don't know what it is like in Australia, but the CDC in the United States says 40% of Americans have reported that they're suffering from anxiety or depression and are using some kind of substance abusively to cope, which in my mind, I'm like 40%, and that's only the people that have reported it. And it's tripled, that percentage has tripled since last year, this same time. Wow. And so it's directly connected to this pandemic. And it's like, it breaks my heart. And I think that, you know, I've had a suicide in my family. My uncle killed himself, and that idea of, and not just men, but anyone feeling so alone in their experience, and coming to that conclusion that it, you know, better just end it. It just breaks my heart, breaks me apart, and I'm kind of scared. Not scared, but I'm just sort of like, I'm fully like ready to take on more people, I feel, because things are just getting so crazy lately that people are sort of grasping at straws, like, help me. And so to be even more vulnerable now and saying like, I am a beacon for that, like I am here to support and here to help, I think it's just, as coaches, it's imperative now more than ever.
Absolutely. And I can certainly see, you know, on sort of a more like that spiritual level, the timing of my life, things happening to prepare me for this very time to be able to serve others. You know, I'm really grateful that I've journeyed to where I am now, so as I can actually be in a position to say, hey, like, jump on board, like I'm here, I've got you, you know, we can do this. Because I find the same, there are so many people now questioning areas of their life that they've never questioned. And if you've not ever sort of stepped into your own inner world and your own inner pain, where there's lots of uncertainty, lots of fear, lots of edges, you know, if you've never done that, and then the first time you're sort of experiencing that is now when the external world sort of seems to be falling apart, the structures that you've relied on are falling apart, that's very frightening. You know, I have sort of found that the people I know who have done some of the inner work and done some of the healing and really faced their own darkness, their experience of COVID has been quite different to people who never have gone on that inward journey, because it's almost like what's happening in the world externally now correlates to what a lot of us have faced by going within. And so we've sort of just strapped in and gone, oh, take a deep breath, here we go again. You know, whereas for others, sadly, who have never done that, this is an incredibly confronting time, and it's sort of forcing, you know, it breaks my heart to think about the domestic violence scenarios that are happening at the moment in parts of the world where you're locked in your house, you know. And I say that like men are victims of domestic violence as well, you know. We always think of the women, obviously, that's a huge issue, absolutely, but there are also men, you know, who experience domestic violence. So it's a really wild time, but I feel so grateful that I can actually be in a position like the two of you are as well, to have a platform and a space to really support people in all of this uncertainty.
Yeah, I mean, it's so confronting because if you think about it, when I took my deep dive, it's painful, it's scary, it's uncertain, it's all the things. But you have people, right? Like, even if it's like you still have, even if it's the smile from a stranger when you're walking down the street, right? Like, that smile sometimes is all you need that day to get through a bad moment. But people don't even have that right now. You can't even see someone smile, you know? Like, I walk around trying to smile through my eyes because I'm like, please see that somebody sees you. And, you know, and it's like, but it's so hard. It's so frustrating to not be able to walk by somebody and just somehow express that love to them. And so if you're like going through that introspection for the first time now, it's this whole other layer of really kind of being isolated in it.
That's so true. Absolutely. And I feel like the energy as well outside is so different. It's sort of that, it's very dull, it's very low, it's depressed, you know. It's in Melbourne at the moment, it certainly is, you know. It's this sort of, and it is, you can feel the disconnection, which you're right, like for those who have done the inner work prior to this, we didn't have that layer to deal with as well, you know. And even just people living alone, not being able to have that connection physically, you know. I do all of my coaching now, as I'm, you know, sure you girls do too, through Zoom, which obviously is still incredibly effective, you know. The value isn't lost, but it's different, you know. It's different to being able to be in a room with a group of people and you can feel the energy, you know, passed onto one another, and sort of that like collective healing physically with one another. And yeah, the lack of that at the moment in itself, I think, is very hard for people to handle, because we're built for connection. That's how we're wired for it. And at the moment, connection looks very different to what we're used to or what has been really healthy. So it's a whole new space we're navigating. And I feel that there are a lot of people, like we're saying, that are really stuck, and even who, you know, which is why I'm so fortunate to do things like this, like podcasts at the moment, or other, you know, radio segments, interviews, or just different platforms to express that there are people out there who can support you. And often the hardest step is just reaching out, you know. It's just that first step of saying, hey, I'm needing some support, what can you offer me? That's once that's done, it gets a bit easier, you know. You've built a bit of rapport with the person. And so yeah, which is another reason why I'm so grateful to be on the podcast with you, as I say, another platform to let people know the support is out there.
Yeah, and I was just going to ask you too, like, for the beginner vulnerability person, I don't know what you say. What would be like the first step? And you know, you did say the first step is reaching out, and I think it might be cool. I just had this idea to ask you, like, what would you, I find it sometimes helpful for people who don't have the language, or they haven't been shown the tools to do things like drawing boundaries and checking in and showing support or asking for support. So could you give some of our listeners, you know, male, female, whatever, maybe like a helpful line or tool to use if they're really like struggling finding the words to be vulnerable enough to say, I need support?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Because it is a very, you know, and even asking for help I've struggled with that, you know. A lot of the work I've done is I've had to learn how to actually ask for help and realize that, first of all, it doesn't mean you're failing. You know, I think that's the first thing to realize and understand within yourself, is that asking for support or acknowledging that things are rough for you right now, or you're not coping, that doesn't correlate with failure. That seems to have been taught somewhere. I don't know if it's been school or like somewhere, though, it's been that, oh, if you can't get your shit together on your own, or if you can't just push through, you're not strong, or you're failing, or you're doing something wrong. So to remove that limiting belief within yourself and realize that it's incredibly courageous and safe to express to the right person, you know, that I'm needing some support. I find a lot of guys who reach out to me for the first time, they're very honest in saying that this is the first time they've done it, you know, and I'm very receptive to that. So if it is the first time, just being really, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect the way that you reach out, you know, even to just say, you know, can I just book a call, or you know, I've not done this before, but I feel like maybe I'm struggling. You know, you don't even have to know within yourself what's wrong. That's the other thing. You don't have to have diagnosed yourself or think, yes, no, it's definitely anxiety and it's definitely self-esteem, and it's definitely some core attachment issues from my childhood. You know, like, you don't need to have that language whatsoever. That's what we're here for, to help you figure out that stuff, like the roots of what it is. Simply just reaching out to say, hey, I'm not feeling great, I'm not feeling myself. You know, I'm trying to think of some of the things that men have even said to me when they first reach out. A lot of them have done that acknowledgement of, I've never done this before, I'm a bit nervous, but, you know, I've seen a post that I related to, can I book in? Literally, I think when you remove that idea of weakness from yourself, that reaching out is weak or means failure, when you remove that, and that's not within the space that you're working from, it's a lot easier to just send a message to say, I need some support, or I'm not sure, but I don't feel great at the moment. Are you around on Thursday? And again, that can be to a friend that you trust, to a family member. It can be to someone like a coach, or, you know, a therapist that you had 5 years ago that you really connected with. Just making that first connection, I find, is, once that's done, people feel a lot more comfortable, and to not be afraid of acknowledging, this is the first time I've done this, or I'm not really sure what's wrong, but I'm not feeling okay. You don't have to know why. Is that helpful a little bit?
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me think about how we really are all so hard on ourselves. Like, we expect, it's like, as soon as we find out that we don't know something or didn't learn something, we automatically go to this place where we expect that we're supposed to know it instantly, right? Like, oh,
Crazy,
I didn't know about boundaries, or I didn't know I was supposed to set them. And now there must be something wrong with me because I don't instantly know how to do it properly, right? Like, we're so
true.
hard on ourselves. And it's like, it's okay if something's new to actually not know how to do it, and to, like, fall down and pick yourself back up. And, you know, I always tell my clients, you're going to flubber through the words. You're going to be messy. You're going to make mistakes as you try something new, but you get better and better each time. And so it's okay not to know. Right. And that's vulnerable, right?
Absolutely.
Like, just being like, I just don't know, is vulnerable.
Yes, that's right. To just express that I don't know. And that's the work. Like, I sometimes will say to the men who have reached out, they're like, you know, when they say, oh, I'm not really sure, I've never done this before, I'm really nervous, you know, I'll say, you know what, you're already on the train. Like, the fact that you're even saying that and you're expressing that to me, guess what, superstar, you're already doing the work. You know, I often find that I'm reminding these guys I work with, like, hey, but you're doing it, you know, like, it's already happening. And like you're saying, Jen, like, we're so hard on ourselves, and we don't always acknowledge where we are moving forward, or where, hey, that was actually, I did something different to what I would have normally done there. And that in itself is you doing the work, you know? So yeah, I think to remove that, like, it often starts with self-love. If you love yourself enough to reach out for support, you know, if you don't have that sense of self-love and self-acceptance on some level, then you're not going to feel worthy of getting the help. You're not going to feel worthy of feeling better. You know, it takes, so the fact that you can even reach out and say, hey, I need some, you know, I'm interested in a program, or can I have a session, or, you know, I'm not really sure what's happening, I'm not feeling great, means that you, again, you're already on the train. Like, you love yourself enough to have actually made that step. So, you know, like, huge congrats, because it is a big deal.
Yeah, totally. And if you don't love yourself yet, and you're not sure you're there yet, and I mean, even just if you're hearing this message and you're not quite there, just know that you are worthy of support, and there is nothing more or less that you have to be in order to receive that. And you know, like you were saying, Emma, just coming to the acknowledgement of, I don't feel okay right now, is just so powerful. And honestly, like, I'm such a fan of you after this conversation.
Oh.
I've seen,
you know,
the show.
Same.
I've seen the show, and I'm like, I didn't realize that, I mean, you've been on an incredible journey yourself, and I'm, you know, what I've seen on the show that you mentioned, The Single Wives on Netflix, I'm sure is just the tip of the iceberg, and it goes so much more deeper. The fact that you've taken this experience and turned it into a pathway to heal others is so inspiring, so admirable. And I think that you couldn't have, you know, ever arrived there. Just like Jen and I have talked about before, the divorce was the best thing that ever happened to us. And it's created this ripple effect of all these new lives that we can impact in a positive way. And so I just want to ask you, you know, where can people find more of you? What are you creating more of? Like, how else are you rippling out into the world? Share with everyone.
Oh, thank you. That was so lovely. And that's the thing. I find that, you know, it is our greatest pain that becomes our greatest gift, you know, and so stepping into that space to do the healing work means that then you can go on in your own unique way to heal the world, which is just, that is enough motivation for me, you know, to lean in on all those moments. So I, you know, like, COVID's changed things a little because, as I was saying earlier, you know, I love running group events or retreats, you know, like in person. But we're pivoting and we're finding new ways to do that. So I'm actually launching a 6-week course in September for men around anger, because I'm finding that at the moment, you know, being stuck at home, a lot of, like, people are, you know, everyone, but obviously I, you know, work with the fellas, these emotions are coming up, and the first sort of reaction or response is sometimes anger, and that's something that I'm finding is a bit of a common thread at the moment. So we're going to do a 6-week group and one-on-one. So you'll get one-on-one coaching with me, as well as the group coaching around anger, like where it comes from, what it is, what does it mean, what's the message behind it, how to heal it. So I love group work's my jam. I love doing group stuff. But I also do one-on-one coaching. I have all kinds of programs from 4 weeks to 3 months. So my website is emmawynne.com.au. Or Emma Wynne Coaching on Instagram. I'm always on the gram, in the DMs, replying to messages. I find that that's more traffic than the website these days. So you know, I'm around. I also have a podcast called Walk Through the Wound, and we literally each week walk through different wounds, things like anxiety, depression, self-sabotage, self-acceptance. This week's one is on self-acceptance. So I'm, you know, if you want, I'm around a little bit. So if you don't want to see me, bad luck, because it's I feel like at the moment I'm like, jeepers, this is like, but you know what, that's been a thing too, like even having the show on Netflix or like, you know, and then the podcast launching and interviews. So it's like, no, I'm worthy of this. That's vulnerable, you know, to sort of be like, you know, like, this is all happening as it's supposed to, and you're allowed to enjoy this process and celebrate it, and like just be like, wow, this is just like so cool how things are mapping out and working out, and, you know, allowing yourself to like acknowledge how far you've come, and then the rewards you're getting for that, you know, which is what like we were talking about earlier. So yeah, I love what I do, and I feel really grateful to have had experiences like the Single Wives, to have worked with Matthew Hussey. I had an amazing psychologist in my early 20s throughout my marriage who just really helped me find my truth. You know, I'm so grateful for the people along the way that have helped to get me to where I am today, you know, and for conversations like this. Like I look at my life sometimes, and obviously it's fucking hard like this. It ain't perfect, you know. Like I say, I've got to walk my talk, which means I'm constantly checking in with my own stuff. But you know, I'm just like, feeling aligned with your purpose and your truth is like, it's worth all of the work to get there. And that's a space I'm very much in at the moment, which I'm really loving. And I feel really fortunate for the people who put their trust in me to walk them through this journey as well. It's really, I feel like you girls will say the same thing. It's quite a privilege.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I always feel so honored.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I know we have to end, and I feel like I could keep talking to you forever because I still have a million questions.
I know, I'm loving this. I'm loving it.
But I did want to reflect one thing, which is as I'm sitting here listening and we're talking, I think that and look, men and women, masculine, feminine, there is so much beauty in it all, and there are differences. But what I'm really hearing come through is that there is so much similarity. We are really struggling with so many of the same stories and limiting beliefs and false narratives and insecurities and all of that. And we might sort of express it in different ways or, you know, show it in different ways. But what's really very clear in this conversation is much of what you said about men and vulnerability, I think is exactly the stories and what I've experienced even with myself with women and vulnerability.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, when I was confronted with this by Matthew Hussey on The Single Wives, which sadly a lot of the footage wasn't shown, because obviously, you know, they film like 600 hours and they air like 16 hours or something. So like there's so much that sadly people haven't been able to see. But, you know, this was like, for me as a woman, stepping into my vulnerability has been like the most confronting aspect of the journey for me, because also as women there is so much expectation on us about who we're supposed to be, and you know to be a mum, to have a career, to have a partner, to have the house, to have like to be all of the roles in all, you know, and all of the things, and it's hard sometimes to like strip that away and go, well, who am I like outside of all that, and do I actually want that? Like, do I actually want to be a mum? You know, like do I actually want a long-term relationship? Just asking those kind of questions for yourself. Definitely as women, we struggle with that. And I find, you know, Matthew Hussey, what was so confronting with him was that he saw me. Like, he saw straight through me. And I was like, shit. Like, I have gone 25 years, or what was I, 27 years, like being able to fool the world, like fool everyone that I am just bubbly and confident and, you know, all of the things. He was like, yeah, girl, now we're going to strip that back and I see you. And that, like, to have someone, and it can be a partner, it could be a friend, it could be a parent, a therapist, you know, to really truly see you like through all of that. Oh, wow. It's confronting, and to not like repel that, which I did a little bit at the start, you know, butted heads with him, but to really just then like sit in that space of like, you see me and I'm just going to allow you to see me. I'm going to sit here in this is, it's vulnerable, and it's quite uncomfortable, but the more that we do it, the more our mind gets used to it. So the less scary it becomes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. So last question, we always like to ask this at the end, if there is some parting wisdom, some like just sentence or quote or whatever that just kind of like rises in your heart to share with our audience to inspire them or provide them wisdom, what would that be?
Oh, wow. Such a good question. I feel like it's around fear, like wherever you're feeling fear, that's where a lot of your answers will lie, so whether it's fear of reaching out or fear to connect, or it's almost like fear is your friend. We changing our relationship around fear doesn't mean, because our mind is always anything new or different, our ego is always going to be like, no, don't go there, don't lean in there, that's unknown, we don't do that, we don't do healthy connection, or like you're saying, Jen, healthy boundaries, or like that's scary. So whatever feels fearful, listen to that. Yeah. That's, I think, lean lot of answer. Yeah, lean into that fear, girl, man, all of you, everyone, me as well, like lean in. And sometimes it's about, the answers lie in where, we're doing the opposite of what we've always done, which is scary. Like, so, and sometimes that is holding back, like, in the dating space too, like sometimes it's not launching, it's like holding back, it's doing, but that feels scary because it's unknown. So I think, definitely, to repair our relationship with fear and realize that it's actually there to teach us something. There's a message that comes with fear.
Love it. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us and just this awesome conversation.
Oh, absolute pleasure. I'm so stoked to be on your podcast. I love what you do. I love what you're about. And I've just seriously thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I feel like we could have just been sitting at a bar, having a cocktail, just chatting, having girl night. It's great.
One day we're putting that out into the universe, and one day we will actually make that happen.
Yes, I would absolutely love that. Count me in.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We will have all of your information in the show notes so all of our listeners can connect with you. And gosh, if you, if you're listening, find her. All right, Deep Chatters, thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, have a wonderful week. We'll see you next week. To all you deep chatters out there, Leah and I want to thank you so much for listening. This is a podcast that's all about connection, so we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on Instagram at Deep Chats Podcast. And if you haven't already, please go to iTunes to rate and review us. Every review helps other deep chatters just like you be able to find this podcast.